Christmas came a little early for all the mascot-loving PlayStation Plus subscribers because this week's update brought us 3 classic platformers. That's right, fans of Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch have a lot to celebrate this month, as PlayStation 5 owners finally have access to Jak Daxter, as well as both Sly 2 Band of Thieves and Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves. That's genuinely exciting news, but are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Edge, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. Get ready for some cartoon shenanigans and double jump your way into a brand new episode of PlayStation Plus Review Crew.
You think you have it rough? Ever try fighting a dozen lurkers at once? Those guys make purse snatchers seem like Boy Scouts. You fight any 300-foot robots today? Didn't think so.
It looks like your partner's doing all the work.
Maybe it looks that way to the untrained eye. Huh? Hey, big guy! Been there long?
A new legacy is born, ready for everyone.
After what was considered at the time to be something of a lackluster launch, the PlayStation 2 really came back with a vengeance in 2001. You see, that was the year they gave us blockbusters like Grand Theft Auto 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, and even Final Fantasy X. 2001 also introduced us to Jak and Daxter, the newest heroes from Naughty Dog, the same people behind Crash Bandicoot. While they would eventually be known for their generation-defining hits like Uncharted, The Last of Us, and if Sony has anything to say about it, the upcoming Intergalactic, The Heretic Prophet, it's fun to go back in time when Jason Rubin, Neil Druckmann, and the rest of the team were more interested in cartoony platformers. And after Crash Bandicoot, Naughty Dog had a lot to prove. Could they revolutionize the genre using the PlayStation 2's advanced hardware? And more importantly, would their fans go along for the ride? Obviously, Jak and Daxter proved to be a big hit, spawning multiple sequels and spin-offs. But what did the critics say at the time? Let's go ahead and find out. When it comes to Electronic Gaming Monthly, they were mostly positive about the new franchise, giving the Precursor Legacy an average score of 8.2 out of 10. Milkman praised the presentation, but wondered if adults would even enjoy these new characters. Jak and Daxter is one of the best looking games I've ever seen, and Jak handles like a bandicoot that's learned some new moves. But therein lies the rub. While the great control and flashy visuals ensure that somebody will enjoy this, these tricks are strictly for kids. Only youngins will enjoy Daxter's Jar Jar-esque zaniness. And only kids possess the patience required to complete this non-stop fetch quest. Younger gamers will cotton to this very quickly, and older gamers will yawn. Chris is one of those older gamers, but you didn't see him yawning. One look at Jak's spin attack and the exploding boxes, and you know the Crash Bandicoot people are behind this. If it weren't for the excellent characters, story, and animation, Jak and Daxter would be just another hunt and gather game like so many other 3D platformers. The difference is that the game is so incredibly polished and well crafted, it doesn't matter if you've already done this 100 times before. It's still fun. And any game on the PlayStation 2 with 0 load times deserves props. Now, believe it or not, that 8.2 from EGM is one of the worst scores of any of the English language magazines, with Edge being the only one to go lower with a straight 8 out of 10. PSM liked the game a bit more, giving this debut a solid 9 out of 10. GamePro agreed, giving it a 4.5 out of 5 and arguing that Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, will captivate you for hours. Its premise is straightforward, yet there's so much to do and see, along with some sizable challenges that'll test even the brightest adventure veterans. They're also hopeful that this would not be the last that we saw of this platforming duo. Spoiler, it was not. Moving up the list, we see the Game Informer went as high as giving Jak and Daxter a 9.25 out of 10, one of their highest scores of the year. However, it was the official US PlayStation magazine that dared to go even higher, offering up the one and only perfect 5 out of 5 score that you're going to see today. Now, despite giving it their highest score, they did complain that Jak and Daxter didn't have a compelling enough story, and in a weird twist that I doubt anybody here saw coming, they said that it didn't have enough role-playing game elements. Let's be honest here though, these are pretty niggling complaints. Although I can't stop thinking about how this game could have been better, that's really only because it's so good to begin with. I don't feel like any of these problems, or even all of them together, are serious enough to knock points off of this remarkably solid game. Sure, it may borrow from just about every successful platform game ever made, but it does it damn well. What more can I say? With an overall average of 89%, this was a strong start for the Jak and Daxter series. It's interesting to hear the critics complain about how this game is geared too much towards children, especially when we know that they would argue the exact opposite direction when it came to the sequel. But hey, that's a story for another day. By the end of 2004, the PlayStation 2 was the console to have for fans of 3D platformers. Even without factoring in all the third-party games that hit the market, Sony was juggling 3 different 3D platformers all on their own. I'm talking Jak and Daxter from Naughty Dog, Ratchet and Clank from Insomniac Games, and Sly Cooper from Sucker Punch. Of the 3, Sly Cooper was the one that ended up taking the most chances, giving fans a platformer that was inspired more by Metal Gear Solid and Siphon Filter than Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario. While never the sales juggernaut that Sony hoped for, they did greenlight a number of sequels, including Sly 2: Band of Thieves on the PlayStation 2. This was really a chance for Sucker Punch to take all that criticism to heart and make a much stronger follow-up to a game that everybody agreed had a lot of potential. But did they succeed? If we go by the Edge review found in issue 143, the answer to that question is a resounding no, giving Sly 2 a 6 out of 10, the exact same score they gave the first game. Edge was just not feeling the series. Sly 2's highest points are when it's at its most chaotic and, ironically, most linear. Those frenzied climaxes of each episode when all the strands of the heist come together, with control flicking between each of the 3 characters as they work to bring the master plan to fruition. But that overdependence on legwork throughout the bulk of each world robs the game of its sparkle, making it feel more work ethic sweatshop than well-paced sweet shop. It's a masterpiece in waiting, so preoccupied with the petty crime of repetition that its variety and imagination are forced to remain in the small time. This is, by far, the worst score of the bunch, with the next lowest score being Game Informer giving Sly 2 a much more respectable 8.5 out of 10. That's basically in line with Electronic Gaming Monthly, which gave the game an average score of 8.7 out of 10 in their 184th issue. Nick concluded that Sly 2 is such an improvement over the first game that it's kinda eerie. What mystical covenants did developer Sucker Punch enter into to produce a game that controls and looks exactly like the first Sly, but feels so much different? The balance between the free roaming parts and the mission objectives is exactly right. Running around, pickpocketing guards, and finding miscellaneous valuables isn't so much fun that you'll deliberately go out and do it, but on the other hand, the non-essential stuff makes for an interesting diversion from the task at hand. And when it comes to the missions themselves, everything is improved. Especially the care and detail put into the mini-games that were so perfunctory the last time around. Sucker Punch does about right for how much Sly 2's quality took me by surprise. Now, Electronic Gaming Monthly may have liked Sly 2, but GamePro loved it, giving the game a strong 4.5 out of 5. That basically matches the 9 out of 10 score that we saw from GMR Magazine in their 22nd issue. It's hard to find fault with Band of Thieves. The graphics are beautiful, the characters original, the story entertaining, and the controls dead on. controlling Sly as he effortlessly scampers across a wire, or hearing Bentley scream catastrophe as his remote control helicopter takes missile damage, raises gaming to an art form almost on par with The Legend of Zelda. Sly 2 is a class act on every level, and a title to which other development houses should aspire. See there? I bet you didn't expect to see Sly Cooper compared to The Legend of Zelda. This episode is full of surprises. With an overall average of 82%, the sequel is down slightly from the 85% we saw for the first game, but the critics that liked it ended up giving the edge to the sequel. Look, this really is a great platformer, and it's one that you should definitely check out on PS Plus.
So Bentley, what's the job?
Well, Clockwork's parts have been stolen, and we're the prime suspects on Inspector Fox's list.
She's really quite lovely when she's angry.
Sly, we've got to clear our name.
Oh, sorry.
And the Murinator's got you covered.
This is our biggest job yet, so we really have to work together, but the whole job is blown if we don't have someone at the controls.
So, are you in?
Rated E for everyone.
At long last, 2005 was the year when all three of Sony's platforming franchises came together in a 1-2-3 punch against the launch of the Xbox 360. Sure, the Jak Daxter installment released that year was really just a racing game, and Ratchet Deadlocked is more of a multiplayer shooter, but the point is that all the franchises were represented. As it turns out, Sly 3: Honor Among Thieves was the most traditional sequel of the three, giving players more of what they loved about the first two installments, only now with 3D glasses for some reason. Was that gonna be enough to move the needle when it came to the critics? In the case of Edge, the answer is yes? Though, I'm not sure it was the 3D glasses alone that moved the score from a 6 to a 7 out of 10. They argued that Sly 3 is a game that feels like bits of lots of other games that you've played before, but not in this order, rarely within such a sure-footed framework, and never presented with such a crisp gloss of cartoon quality production. And it's all bunched together more tightly and enjoyably than Sly 2. It's an extravagant, fan-pleasing package that rivals Splinter Cell Chaos Theory's generosity of game modes and breadth of content. Even if those escapades can seem generic, Sly 3 confidently retains the series' tradition of excellence and execution above everything else. Now, moving over to Game Informer, we see that they actually thought that this was the weakest of the three games. They gave Sly 3 a score of 7.25 out of 10, down sharply from the 8.5 out of 10 they gave Sly 2, and the 9.25 they gave the original. That's a 2-point swing in the wrong direction. Electronic Gaming Monthly, on the other hand, liked this basically as much as the other two, giving it an 8.5 out of 10. G Ford makes the case that while not carrying the same cachet as Sony's Ratchet and Jak series, the Sly games have always been just as solid, and Sly 3: Honor Among Thieves continues the tradition. It's typical Sly, a mix of stealth and polished platforming gameplay with dozens of mostly entertaining mini-games breaking up the action, and some key additions to keep things interesting. The game's biggest faults are the rare, uninspired collectathon missions and an inconsistency in the quality of some levels. The good far outweighs the bad, though. Dana liked it even more, explaining that while not very innovative, the Sly series has always been a hallmark for good production value and fun gameplay. It's hard to argue with following a solid formula. Though none of the new playable characters have an extensive moveset, they're still fun in their limited way, and I particularly enjoy the way developer Sucker Punch has structured the missions so that you're switching back and forth among characters a lot. All in all, this Raccoons game is still fun. No need to call Animal Control just yet. Moving up the scale, we see that the usually consistent GamePro gave Sly 3 a score of 4.5 out of 5, the same thing they gave the second game. The official US PlayStation magazine agreed with GamePro, also giving the game a 4.5 out of 5. They complained that the minigames can be a little bit hit or miss. The mode where you face off against each other as Sly and Carmelita is pretty fun, But the mode in which you try to sink each other's boats just feels pointless. It's still a good game though, and one of the few out there that's fun for families to play together. Though on this, the third time around, the game's template is starting to feel a tad formulaic. It's still a formula that works well, and fans of the series should be pleased. Like, even with the gimmicky 3D glasses, the critics agreed that Sly 3 is another solid entry. Some didn't like it as much as the second installment, but it turns out that the overall average remained the same with an 82%. While this certainly isn't my favorite of the Sly games made by Sucker Punch, it's still a strong reminder why the PlayStation 2 was the system to own for must-play platformers.
What's your role? Sly 3. Rated everyone 10 and older.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you'll be happy to know that we post new episodes just like this one every time classic games get added to modern consoles. We have a whole playlist with hundreds of games. So, give it a binge this holiday season. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite PlayStation 2 platformer? Do you like Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, Sly Cooper, or maybe one of those games from a third party? Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back next week with a fun holiday schedule, including a Christmas-themed review crew episode that you're gonna love. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.